I checked my watch as the grandfather clock in the foyer chimed once. 6:42 p.m. That was the exact moment everything changed. The dining room glowed beneath warm crystal chandeliers, reflecting against polished hardwood floors and tall windows overlooking the quiet neighborhood. The house had cost $600,000, every dollar earned through years of impossible hours, impossible clients, and impossible expectations. I had bought it for one reason only: to give my mother a home where she would never have to feel small again. Ironically, this became the place where someone tried to make her feel invisible. The smell of roasted chicken, fresh cornbread, and sweet potatoes filled the room while soft jazz drifted from hidden ceiling speakers. Around the long dining table sat my father, my older brother Marcus, his wife Emily Brooks, and several relatives who always seemed to appear whenever comfort was involved. My mother smiled as she carried another bowl toward the table. It was her 62nd birthday. She insisted on serving everyone herself. "I don't mind," she had whispered to me earlier. "I just want everyone together." I had smiled back because arguing with her kindness had never changed anything. She still believed family could heal itself if she loved hard enough. I had stopped believing that years ago. Emily leaned back in her chair, examining the dining room with the confidence of someone who mistook borrowed comfort for ownership. Her designer bracelet sparkled every time she lifted her wine glass. She wasn't born into this family. Sometimes it felt like she had always controlled it. Marcus laughed at one of her stories while my father nodded proudly, as if every word she spoke somehow elevated our family status. I quietly watched. Listening had always taught me more than talking. My mother reached for another stack of plates. Emily suddenly picked up the serving tray and held it out toward her with a playful smile that wasn't playful at all. "Oh," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "the maid should clear the dishes before dessert." For one brief second, the room became perfectly still. Then came the laughter. Marcus chuckled first. One cousin followed. Then my father let out a deep laugh that echoed against the walls. Even relatives who looked uncomfortable forced polite smiles rather than challenge the moment. My mother's hands froze around the tray. Her smile disappeared without making a sound. She lowered her eyes. Not because she agreed. Because she had spent an entire lifetime surviving moments exactly like this. I felt my heartbeat slow instead of quicken. People often expect anger to arrive like thunder. Mine arrived like ice. Emily looked toward me.
"What?"
she asked with a grin. "It was just a joke." Marcus shrugged. "Don't be so serious, Naomi." I folded my napkin carefully onto the table. "I haven't said anything." Emily laughed again.
"Exactly."
They thought silence meant surrender. They had absolutely no idea silence could also be strategy. The leather strap of my purse rested against my wrist. Inside was a sealed document folder. Inside that folder rested the original property deed. I could almost feel the weight of the paper without touching it. Every signature, every notarized page, every legal protection. It had taken months to complete the purchase without anyone discovering the truth. Not even my mother knew. The mortgage had been paid in full before she ever received the keys. Every tax payment came from my account. Every insurance policy listed exactly one legal owner.
Me.
Emily stood and admired the living room beyond the dining area. I still can't believe Marcus found such an incredible family home. I watched her run her fingers across the marble countertop. "Our home is perfect. Our home." The words floated through the room with effortless confidence. No one corrected her, not even my father. He simply smiled proudly at Marcus, accepting the lie because it fit the image he wanted everyone else to believe. I looked toward my mother. She quietly carried another stack of dishes into the kitchen.
"No birthday cake. No celebration."
Just another woman cleaning after people who never appreciated her. A familiar ache settled inside my chest. Not grief. Recognition. Years of conditional love had prepared me for this exact moment. Emily believed she had embarrassed my mother. Marcus believed he had protected his wife's pride. My father believed appearances mattered more than truth. Every one of them believed I was quietly accepting it. What they didn't know was that the truth had been sitting beside me all evening. Inside my purse rested the original deed to the house. And none of them realized the home they proudly claimed as theirs legally belonged to me. People often ask how someone can stay so calm while being humiliated. The answer is simple. My silence didn't begin that evening. It began when I was a little girl, long before the birthday dinner, long before Emily Brooks walked into my family's life, long before a property deed became the most powerful document I would ever own. I grew up hearing my name spoken with disappointment while my older brother, Marcus Carter, heard his with pride. We shared the same parents, the same neighborhood, and the same opportunities, yet we were never measured by the same standards. Marcus had lighter skin, an easy smile, and a talent for making people believe promises that rarely became reality. I was darker-skinned, quieter, and more comfortable with books than conversations. Somehow, those differences became excuses for treating us differently. My father never admitted it directly. He didn't have to. Marcus has the personality people respect, he would say whenever relatives visited. Then he would glance at me. You should learn from your brother if you want to get ahead. I heard those words so many times they stopped sounding like criticism and started sounding like family tradition. Every achievement Marcus celebrated became another expectation for me. When he earned average grades, my father called him gifted. When I graduated at the top of my class, he nodded once before asking what came next. Success only mattered if it belonged to Marcus. Everything I accomplished simply became another responsibility. My mother handled things differently. She never raised her voice. She preferred guilt. Whenever my father overlooked me or praised Marcus for something we both accomplished, she would pull me aside with tired eyes and gentle hands. Please keep the peace, Naomi. That sentence became her favorite prayer. If you argue, this family falls apart. If you stay patient, things will get better. If you sacrifice today, everyone will appreciate you tomorrow. I believed her for years. I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left to give. Looking back now, I realize peace without respect is only another form of surrender. Everything shifted again when Marcus married Emily Brooks. She entered every room dressed like she belonged there before anyone else. Her polished manners impressed neighbors, business owners, and even my father within weeks. She knew exactly how to flatter people with influence while quietly looking down on everyone else. At family gatherings, she complimented expensive furniture before greeting relatives. She talked about private schools, country clubs, and investment opportunities as though wealth automatically created wisdom. My father admired her confidence. Marcus admired the attention she attracted. My mother admired that someone finally admired Marcus. I admired nothing. The first time Emily asked about my career, she smiled politely. So you're still practicing corporate law? I am, I answered. She tilted her head. I've always wondered what corporate attorneys actually do. Before I could answer, she laughed softly. You mostly shuffle paperwork while real entrepreneurs build businesses, right? Marcus laughed immediately. Dad, see? That's what I've been saying. My father smiled. Business builders create wealth. I simply sipped my coffee, explaining complex mergers, commercial contracts, fiduciary duties, and real estate litigation to people determined not to understand would have accomplished nothing. They measured careers by appearance. I measured them by results. Emily loved introducing Marcus as an entrepreneur. She conveniently ignored how unstable his companies actually were. Every new venture arrived with expensive suits, luxury cars, and ambitious speeches. Every failed investment quietly disappeared from conversation. My work never needed applause. It produced something far more valuable: stability. Months before my mother's birthday, I met my former law professor, Judge Evelyn Brooks, for lunch after she retired from the bench. She had guided me through law school and taught me something more important than statutes. She taught me patience. When I told her I had purchased a home for my mother, she smiled warmly before her expression became serious. "Keep every ownership document private," she said. I looked surprised. "Even for my family? Especially from your family?" She folded her hands across the table. "Greed has remarkable timing, Naomi. It rarely appears before success. It always arrives afterward." Her words stayed with me. Before we left the restaurant, she handed me a folder containing recommendations for asset protection. "A gift should still be protected," she said. "Love doesn't replace legal structure." I followed every recommendation. The property remained carefully shielded. Every filing was completed correctly. Every ownership record matched. Every signature was verified.
No shortcuts, no assumptions, no emotional decisions.
They thought the beautiful house represented unconditional generosity. What they didn't know was that generosity without protection often becomes an invitation to exploitation. That was why I never transferred full ownership. The home had never been gifted outright. It was protected through a carefully structured legal trust. The house was quiet when I finally walked outside. The laughter still echoed in my mind, even though the front door had already closed behind me. Cool night air settled across my skin as I crossed the driveway without looking back. I unlocked my car, slipped into the driver's seat, and closed the door. Silence. Real silence. For the first time all evening, I could hear my own breathing instead of everyone else's opinions. The dashboard clock read 8:17 p.m. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I rested both hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at the home glowing beneath warm porch lights. To anyone passing by, it looked like the perfect family gathering. Beautiful landscaping, expensive stonework, smiling guests moving through large windows. Appearances had always been my father's favorite currency. I had spent my entire life paying for them. Hours passed without me noticing. Cars came and went. Guests laughed as they carried leftovers to their vehicles. Someone hugged my father near the front porch. Marcus stood proudly beside Emily, accepting compliments as though he had personally built everything surrounding him. They had absolutely no idea. The house, the mortgage, the taxes, every maintenance payment, every insurance premium, every dollar had come from me, yet no one thanked me. Not because they forgot, because they never believed I deserved recognition in the first place. The dashboard clock eventually changed to 11:26 p.m. I closed my eyes. For years I had convinced myself my family simply struggled to express love equally. That excuse finally collapsed. The truth was quieter, more painful. They never loved me because I was their daughter. They loved what I solved. When tuition needed paying, they called me. When legal paperwork became confusing, they called me. When someone needed advice, money, or protection, they called me. But when celebration arrived, they celebrated Marcus. A strange calm settled over me. Not anger.
Clarity.
I realized I had mistaken usefulness for belonging. Those two things are not the same. I whispered the words aloud simply because I needed to hear them. I'm done earning love. No one answered. No one needed to. That sentence changed everything. I wasn't becoming cruel. I was becoming honest. The forgiving daughter disappeared inside that parked car. The woman who stepped forward afterward understood something my family never expected. Kindness without boundaries becomes permission. The next morning, I drove across town to visit Judge Evelyn Brooks. Her office overlooked the river, quiet and orderly, just like her mind. Shelves lined with legal volumes filled the room, and the familiar scent of coffee and old leather reminded me of law school. She looked at me for only a moment before speaking. It finally happened, didn't it? I nodded. They crossed a line. I know. She reached into her desk and placed a sealed envelope between us. I prepared this months ago. I looked at her. You expected something like this? I expected success to attract entitlement. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were certified copies of the trust agreement, detailed occupancy provisions, and amendments protecting the property from unauthorized financial decisions. Beneath the documents rested a small flash drive. Every payment, she explained. Wire transfers, closing statements, tax records, insurance premiums, maintenance invoices. Every financial contribution you've made is documented. I held the flash drive in my hand. It felt surprisingly light. Its contents carried years of sacrifice. Judge Evelyn smiled gently. Evidence is always more patient than emotion. I thanked her before organizing every document inside my briefcase. For the first time since the birthday dinner, I felt completely prepared. Days passed. I remained quiet. I answered family messages politely. I accepted every invitation. Meanwhile, Marcus and Emily became increasingly confident. Our family estate is finally coming together, Marcus announced during one phone call. Emily laughed. I'm thinking marble in the upstairs bathrooms. Maybe we'll extend the patio before summer. They discussed contractors, architects, luxury landscaping, outdoor kitchens. They never asked my permission. Why would they? They believed ownership came from confidence instead of legal title. Every conversation became another piece of evidence. Every message confirmed they were publicly presenting the property as something it was not. They thought they were winning. What they didn't know was that every careless statement strengthened my legal position. Then, 3 days later, an elegant cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. My assistant smiled as she placed it on my desk. It looks important. I broke the seal. Inside rested a formal invitation embossed with gold lettering. Marcus Carter and Emily Brooks cordially invite you to an exclusive fundraising gala at the Carter family estate. I read the final line twice. The event would be held the following Saturday. Inside my own house. I didn't confront anyone. That surprised everyone, especially Emily. Most people expect betrayal to be answered immediately, with raised voices, emotional speeches, or dramatic exits. I understood something my years as a corporate attorney had taught me over countless negotiations. The strongest position is often the quietest one. Every careless word spoken by the other side becomes another piece of evidence if you are patient enough to let them keep talking. So, I stayed quiet. I answered family messages politely. I attended Sunday dinners. I smiled when expected. They mistook composure for defeat. They had absolutely no idea I had already shifted the battle from the dining room to the conference room. The Monday after my mother's birthday, I walked into my law firm's downtown office just before 8 a.m. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, while fresh coffee filled the reception area. My litigation team was already waiting inside the conference room with organized folders stacked neatly across the polished oak table. No one wasted time. One attorney pushed a file toward me. "We've verified everything." I opened the folder. Inside were emails, investor presentations, financing requests, and sworn summaries from witnesses. Emily had been introducing herself as a co-owner of the property while Marcus searched for additional funding for his struggling business. I continued reading. She hadn't merely exaggerated. She had represented the house as family-owned collateral during private conversations with prospective investors. One attorney spoke carefully. She never transferred title because she couldn't. but she repeatedly implied ownership to establish financial credibility. Another attorney added, those statements become significant if anyone relied on them when making investment decisions. I nodded once. Document everything. We already have. There was no excitement in the room. Only precision. Exactly how I preferred it. Over the following weeks, evidence continued arriving. Emails, text messages, photographs from networking events, copies of promotional brochures. Each document strengthened the same conclusion. Marcus and Emily had built an impressive image. Unfortunately for them, images carry very little weight inside a courtroom. Outside the office, Emily's confidence grew larger every day. At one family brunch, she looked me up and down before smiling. You really wear business suits everywhere. I glanced at my navy blazer. They're comfortable. She laughed into her coffee. They're boring. Marcus grinned. You should loosen up once in a while. Emily tilted her head. I suppose corporate attorneys don't need style. You mostly push paperwork around anyway. Several relatives laughed. I simply buttered my toast. Correcting people determined to misunderstand me had never been an effective use of energy. A few minutes later, she looked through the restaurant window toward an expensive neighborhood across the street. I've always loved communities like this. Then she looked directly at me. I imagine homes around here are far beyond most lawyers' budgets. Marcus chuckled, especially attorneys who spend all day reading contracts. Emily smiled sweetly. I wasn't trying to insult you. I know, I answered calmly. She expected an argument. Instead, she received agreement. Nothing frustrates arrogant people more than silence. She believed she had won. What she didn't know was that every public remark revealed exactly how comfortable she had become claiming a lifestyle she had never earned. Behind closed doors, my legal team continued working. Certified ownership records were ordered directly from the county recorder's office. Title insurance documentation was reviewed again. Occupancy provisions contained within the trust were carefully organized. Draft injunctions were prepared in case unauthorized financial activity continued. Every page received another review. Every date matched. Every signature aligned. Facts are remarkably patient. Unlike emotions, they never become exhausted. One afternoon, another attorney entered carrying a thinner folder. This part concerns me even more. Inside were statements from several elderly residents in my mother's neighborhood. Marcus and Emily had spoken with them during community events. They described the property as proof of their financial stability. A retired couple later invested money into Marcus's newest business after believing those claims. Another widow contributed part of her retirement savings because she believed the company was backed by valuable real estate. The investment failed. The money disappeared. The neighbors weren't wealthy. They were ordinary people who trusted polished appearances. I closed the folder slowly. This stopped being only about my family. The attorney nodded.
Yes.
It now involves innocent victims. That realization settled heavily across my shoulders. Justice suddenly carried greater responsibility. I wasn't protecting only my mother's dignity anymore. I was protecting people who had been persuaded by confidence instead of truth. Meanwhile, Marcus and Emily continued hosting dinners, touring guests through rooms they spoke about as though they personally owned every brick. They had absolutely no idea every conversation was quietly being documented. Every exaggerated claim, every misleading introduction, every confident promise. Each one strengthened the legal foundation beneath my feet while weakening theirs. Then my assistant walked into my office holding another envelope. It looks like an event invitation. I opened it carefully. Inside was the finalized guest list for Marcus and Emily's upcoming fundraising gala. My eyes moved slowly down the page. Federal judges, bank presidents, city council members, commercial developers, senior attorneys. business leaders, and nearly every investor Marcus desperately hoped would finance his failing company. I placed the list back inside the envelope. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. They had invited the most important witnesses they could possibly gather. They simply didn't realize those witnesses would be watching the truth instead of the performance. The fundraiser began at exactly 7 p.m. The house glowed beneath soft landscape lighting, every window reflecting the warm gold of crystal chandeliers inside. Luxury cars lined the quiet street while valets opened doors for guests dressed in tailored suits and evening gowns. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, filling the air with elegant music that almost disguised the tension waiting beneath the polished surface. I stepped from my car, wearing a tailored black pantsuit with subtle gold accents. It wasn't chosen to impress anyone. It was chosen to remind myself that I wasn't attending a celebration. I was entering a courtroom without a judge. The leather portfolio beneath my arm contained everything that mattered. The original property deed, certified trust documents, payment records, title insurance. Every page represented years of discipline. Every signature represented the truth. They had absolutely no idea. Inside, Marcus greeted investors with effortless confidence, while Emily floated from conversation to conversation, smiling as though she had built every wall surrounding us. My father looked proud. My mother looked tired. I quietly accepted a glass of sparkling water and stood near the back of the room. Emily noticed me almost immediately. "There she is," she announced with a smile wide enough for everyone to hear. Marcus's hard-working little sister. Several guests nodded politely. One banker smiled at me. Marcus laughed. "Naomi works too much." Emily continued. "Someone has to handle paperwork while entrepreneurs build the future." A few guests chuckled. I simply returned a courteous smile. Silence had carried me this far. It would carry me a little farther. The evening continued with speeches about investment opportunities and community leadership. Marcus described ambitious expansion plans for his struggling company while Emily praised the family estate that supposedly reflected their success. Each sentence settled heavily in the room. Each sentence quietly strengthened my position. Then my mother stepped toward the microphone. She held a small handwritten note in trembling hands. "I'd just like to thank everyone for—" Emily gently reached over and lowered the microphone. "Oh," she said with an amused laugh, "the staff should stay in the kitchen. We've got this." The room exploded with uncomfortable laughter. Some people laughed because they thought it was harmless. Others laughed because everyone else did. My mother's shoulders dropped. She quietly stepped back. I watched her place the note into her pocket. That small movement hurt more than any insult. I slowly set my glass on a nearby table.
No anger. No hesitation.
I walked toward the center of the room. My heels echoed across the marble floor until every conversation faded. Marcus frowned. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I laid my leather portfolio on the dining table. Then I opened it. First, I placed the original property deed onto the polished wood. Next came the certified trust agreement. Beside that, I carefully arranged years of payment records. Mortgage payoff confirmation, property tax receipts, insurance documents, maintenance invoices. Finally, I placed the title insurance certificate on top. No one spoke. The quartet stopped playing. Silence spread through the room with astonishing speed. Marcus finally broke it. "What kind of stunt is this?" I remained calm. Emily folded her arms. "Those papers don't prove anything." I still said nothing. She laughed again. "You attorneys think every problem can be solved with documents." Marcus stepped closer. "You need to put those away before you embarrass yourself." I met his eyes without changing my expression. "I don't believe I'm the one in danger of embarrassment." Emily rolled her eyes. "Please." She turned toward the guests. This is exactly what I mean. Lawyers love creating drama. Several people looked uncertain now. The confidence that had filled the room only minutes earlier had begun to disappear. The front doors opened. My legal team entered together. Behind them walked a senior title officer from the county recorder's office carrying certified ownership records. Every head turned. The title officer introduced himself professionally before examining the original deed. I have verified these documents against county records. He paused. The legal owner of this property is Naomi Carter. Complete silence.
He continued.
The residence has never been transferred to Marcus Carter or Emily Brooks. It remains protected under a legally recorded trust with clearly defined occupancy provisions. Emily laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. The title officer calmly produced additional certified copies. The public record confirms it. Marcus looked at me. You planned this. I prepared for the truth. Emily shook her head. This house belongs to our family. It does, I answered quietly. Just not in the way you've been telling people. One investor slowly raised his hand. Mrs. Brooks, during our financing meeting, didn't you describe yourself as a co-owner? Emily froze. Well, everyone understood what I meant. Another investor frowned. You specifically said the property strengthened your financial position. She tried to recover. It was basically ours. The title officer spoke again. Ownership is not determined by implication. An attorney beside me opened another folder. We also have copies of multiple statements made during financing discussions. Emily kept talking. I never intended to mislead anyone. The more she spoke, the worse it became. Each explanation contradicted the last. Each denial exposed another inconsistency. She wasn't being defeated by me. She was being defeated by her own words. Around the room, conversations shifted. Bankers exchanged uneasy glances. Investors quietly closed their folders. City officials stepped away from Marcus. Even my father looked unable to defend what was unfolding before him. The confidence that had filled the house when I arrived had completely vanished. No shouting was necessary. No dramatic speech was required. Facts accomplished everything emotion never could. I gathered the documents one by one and returned them to my portfolio. Then I looked around the silent room. I never raised my voice. I closed the portfolio. The truth spoke loudly enough. The morning after the fundraiser felt strangely ordinary. The sun still rose over the neighborhood. Birds still gathered in the old oak tree outside the front window. Delivery trucks still rolled through the streets as if nothing remarkable had happened. Yet everything had changed. By 9 a.m. on Monday, my legal team had already filed the first round of court documents. Certified copies of the property deed, trust agreement, title records, and supporting financial evidence accompanied every filing. There was no dramatic language.
No emotional accusations.
Only verified facts organized exactly as the law required. I had learned years earlier that emotions may persuade people. Evidence persuades courts. Within days, word spread through the business community. Investors who had applauded Marcus during the gala suddenly stopped returning his calls. Meetings were canceled. Financing discussions disappeared from his calendar. Partnerships that once seemed guaranteed quietly dissolved. They had believed confidence was enough. Now they wanted documentation. Marcus tried calling me several times. I never ignored him. I simply referred every conversation to my attorney. That response frustrated him far more than an argument ever could. Emily's situation deteriorated even faster. Several investors who had relied upon her statements regarding the property's ownership retained their own legal counsel. Civil complaints alleged financial misrepresentation and requested compensation for losses connected to investment decisions. No criminal courtroom drama unfolded overnight. Real legal consequences rarely happen that way. Instead, letters arrived. Depositions were scheduled. Insurance carriers requested documentation. Attorneys exchanged carefully written correspondence. Every step carried weight. Every signature mattered. Emily continued insisting everyone had misunderstood her. Unfortunately for her, recorded statements and witness testimony rarely suffer from poor memory. Judge Evelyn reviewed each development with the calm confidence I had always admired. During one meeting, she closed a folder and looked directly at me. "You prepared before emotion replaced judgment. I remembered your advice." She smiled gently. Preparation usually sounds quiet. Panic never does. Outside the courtroom, another battle unfolded inside my own family. My father spent decades believing reputation could solve almost every problem. He knew influential people. He attended charity dinners. He proudly reminded everyone about the family's public image. This time, none of that mattered. Legal documents do not recognize social status. Verified ownership cannot be negotiated through pride. For the first time in my life, I watched certainty leave my father's face. He wasn't angry. He was confused. He had spent so many years believing appearances created reality that he struggled to accept reality had finally exposed the appearance. Several evenings later, my mother asked if we could speak privately. We sat together on the back patio as the evening breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass across the yard. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry." I remained silent. She continued, "I kept asking you to keep the peace because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" She closed her eyes. "Losing Marcus." Her voice trembled. "I believed if I challenged him, he'd leave the family forever." I listened without interrupting. "So I kept asking you to sacrifice instead." Tears filled her eyes. "I convinced myself you were stronger." I reached across the table and gently covered her hand with mine. "You asked the strongest person to carry the heaviest burden." She nodded slowly. "I know." For the first time, her apology didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded honest. That honesty mattered. It didn't erase the past, but it opened the door to something different. Meanwhile, my attorneys finalized enforcement of every provision contained within the trust agreement. Occupancy clauses existed for a reason. Unauthorized financial representations constituted material violations. The legal remedy was straightforward. Marcus and Emily received formal notice requiring them to vacate the property within the period specified by the agreement. There was no celebration, no victory party, only another envelope delivered according to procedure. They argued. Their attorneys negotiated. Deadlines were extended briefly to allow an orderly transition. Eventually, they left. The moving trucks arrived early on a gray Thursday morning. Furniture disappeared room by room. Luxury decorations followed. By sunset, the driveway stood empty. The house felt peaceful again. Not because it was larger, because the constant tension had finally left with them. Several elderly neighbors later accepted negotiated settlements funded through insurance agreements and remaining business assets They did not recover everything they had lost, but they recovered enough to begin rebuilding. Watching them receive those checks brought me more satisfaction than humiliating Marcus ever could. Justice had reached the people who truly deserved it. A week later, Judge Evelyn visited the house for coffee. She walked through the living room quietly before smiling. She said, "People imagine justice as something loud." I poured 2 cups of coffee. "It rarely is." She accepted the mug. The strongest victories usually sound like doors quietly closing. I looked around the home my mother had always deserved. For the first time since purchasing it, the rooms finally felt like a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. I thought the hardest chapter had finally ended. Then one quiet afternoon, the doorbell rang. I walked toward the entrance and looked through the glass. Standing on the front porch were my mother and father. For the first time in their lives, they weren't walking inside as though they belonged there. They were standing outside, waiting for me to decide whether to let them in. Months passed, and something I had almost forgotten finally returned to my life.
Peace.
Not the fragile kind my mother had always begged me to protect. Not the exhausting version built on silence, sacrifice, and pretending everything was fine. This peace was different. It was earned. The house felt different too. Morning sunlight poured through the large windows without carrying tension into every room. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee instead of quiet resentment. Soft jazz played through the speakers while my mother watered the flowers she had planted along the back patio. For the first time in years, I saw her smiling when no one was watching. That mattered more than any courtroom victory. The trust remained exactly as it had been written from the beginning. My mother lived comfortably in the home under its original protections, knowing she would never again be manipulated into surrendering her security for someone else's approval. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She no longer rushed to please everyone before caring for herself. One afternoon, she folded laundry beside me and quietly said, "I spent so many years believing love meant giving away pieces of myself." I looked at her.
"What do you believe now?"
She smiled. "I believe real love doesn't ask you to disappear." Those words stayed with me. Healing hadn't happened overnight. It happened through small choices repeated every day. She stopped asking me to keep the peace. Instead, she started asking how she could help protect it. That change meant everything. My father changed too, although much more slowly. For decades, he had measured success by appearances, expensive suits, influential friends, and impressive addresses. He believed respect could be borrowed from status. Life eventually corrected him. Business invitations became less frequent. Community leaders who once sought his opinion quietly moved on. People who had admired confidence suddenly valued integrity instead. Watching his influence disappear wasn't satisfying. It was sobering. One evening he sat across from me on the back porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. I was wrong, he admitted. The words sounded unfamiliar coming from him. I spent my life believing the loudest person in the room was usually the strongest. He looked toward the house. I never realized strength could look so quiet. I didn't remind him of the years he overlooked me. He already remembered them himself. Sometimes accountability speaks more honestly than punishment ever could. Marcus disappeared from public attention almost as quickly as he had once chased it. After investors withdrew their support and lenders refused additional financing, his company collapsed beneath obligations it could no longer satisfy. Eventually, bankruptcy filings became public record. The man once introduced as the family's brightest success quietly packed away the last pieces of a dream built on borrowed credibility. I felt no celebration, only closure. Emily's world changed just as dramatically. Her polished social circle slowly dissolved after civil proceedings revealed how frequently she had misrepresented the property's ownership. Charity galas stopped sending invitations. Networking events no longer welcomed her with enthusiastic smiles. Reputation had carried her into many rooms. Truth quietly escorted her out of them. After settling the remaining civil claims, she relocated to another state, hoping distance might accomplish what honesty never could. It didn't. Some lessons follow us wherever we go. As for me, I stopped chasing something I had wanted since childhood: acceptance. I no longer needed my father's approval to measure my worth. I no longer needed Marcus's recognition to validate my accomplishments. I no longer confused sacrifice with love. Instead, I focused on protecting what I had spent years building. The house became more than an address. It became proof that discipline outlasts arrogance, that preparation defeats performance, That quiet strength often speaks louder than loud confidence. Most importantly, I finally understood what generational wealth truly means. It isn't measured only by property values, investment accounts, or impressive neighborhoods. Real generational wealth includes wisdom, boundaries, legal protection, the courage to refuse manipulation before it becomes tradition. Money can be inherited. So can unhealthy patterns. Breaking those patterns may become the greatest inheritance we ever leave behind. Sometimes I walk through the house at sunrise before anyone else wakes. I run my hand across the banister, listen to the peaceful silence, and remember the night everyone laughed while my mother stood holding a serving tray. They believed they were witnessing weakness. What they didn't know is that they were witnessing the final moments before everything changed. They thought they were protecting power. Instead, they revealed exactly who deserved it. Life eventually wrote its own ending. My father lost the public influence he once protected more fiercely than his own family. My mother rebuilt our relationship through consistent actions instead of guilty promises. Marcus accepted bankruptcy after pride could no longer pay his debts. Emily lost the social reputation she valued above honesty and quietly disappeared from the circles she once believed she ruled. Justice didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with signatures, records,
Truth.
and patience. Now, if you're listening to my story because someone has made you feel invisible, remember this. Kindness is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. Protecting your peace is never betrayal. If you've spent your life earning love that was always conditional, remember this. Protecting your peace isn't betrayal, it is self-respect. And I'll leave you with the lesson that changed my life forever. Never argue for a seat in someone else's house when you already hold the deed to your own future.